Hey guys, what's up? Sando here, and today I'll be reviewing this flagship IEMs from LittleDot. Yep, the same LittleDot that is making tube-based amplifiers, solid state amplifiers, some digital to analog converters. And since LittleDot went so deep into the rabbit hole with personal audio, it was only a matter of time when they started developing headphones, portable or not. It's a little bit weird seeing IEMs being released first, but I will go with a wild guess that some desktop headphones are being developed right now as we speak. Anyways, let's check them out and let's see how they perform. In terms of build quality, the IEM body is carefully carved on a CNC machine from a small block of aluminum. The body itself is small and it's hard to believe that 4 drivers are sitting somewhere inside. It has a somewhat longer sound tube and headphone nozzle, meaning that no matter how deep you insert them, they will never touch your cheeks. I personally find them comfortable long term if I'm using the smallest ear tips. The diameter of the nozzle is exactly the same I've seen in most IEM designs. It's somewhere around 5 mm, and if you already have a bigger ear tip collection, those will fit perfectly on the KIS. KIS are obviously using a detachable cable, it's very flexible, doesn't have any microphonics whatsoever, and seems to be well made. LittleDot went with 2-pin connectors instead of MMCX ones. 2-pin connectors are still very popular and you can find lots of third-party cables with this configuration, just in case you need some extra ones. As for the tech inside this one, this is where it gets super interesting. KIS is a hybrid IEM, that is for sure, but a different one since it's not using a single but 2 10mm dynamic drivers for its bass and mid-range and another 2 balanced armature drivers for the high and ultra-high frequencies. We all know that a bigger dynamic driver would deliver a much nicer bass performance, quantity and quality-wise, but 2 dynamic drivers in an IEM? That's something new and quite an interesting design philosophy if you ask me, and I'm quite curious how they will sound. Their impedance sits at 18 ohms and their super high sensitivity of 105 dB per 1 mW of power will put little to no pressure on your digital source or amplifier. Just make sure to use a clean sounding headphone jack and you are all set. My preliminary sound impressions are quite straightforward. Bass hits like a hammer, yep, correct, check. Sub-bass goes into the subsonics and easily reaches those 20 Hz notes. Yep, double check. Linear and well-defined mid-range with lush, smooth and guttural voices. Triple check. Enough treble presence in the most sensitive part of our hearing, so somewhere between 6 and 10 kHz. Quadruple check, and also a gentle roll-off past 10 kHz that will shoo away any listening fatigue and be in line with the rest of the LittleDot audio gear. Yep, that is correct. So yeah, that's quite amazing. Coming from several linear sounding IEMs, especially those that are rounding the frequency response, this felt like a soundstorm with its bottomless bass performance. I'm very serious in here. Its sub-bass delivery is nothing short of spectacular. So it's extremely low, it's a planar bass low, it's tight, it's also clean sounding. These are not your typical hybrid IEMs. Personally, I didn't experience such kind of bass in a hybrid IEM. These are sounding simply like having a full-blown party inside your head with bass notes hitting your skull one after the other. Sub-bass is actually a little bit overdone with this, so it's standing out more often compared to the rest of the frequency response. But on the plus side, it's always clean, always textured, always super defined and without any kind of distortion. It's tight, it's fast and extremely visceral sounding, a really hard-hitting type of bass. It's actually not surprising to me at all experiencing this type of uplifting performance with these headphones and not a straight as a line sonic experience. LittleDot is first and foremost a tube-loving company. They aren't killing it with linear sounding units. They are more about the musical experience than about the numbers game, and this IEM feels exactly like this. While these ones are not extremely extended in the treble region and are not a linear type of IEMs, it's a really engaging type of IEM and always wants to make you move. It's almost like a tiny vacuum tube somewhere is sitting inside the body of this IEM, pumping simply positive emotions, rich harmonics, and improving the richness of and lushness of the music. So if you like trebles extremely detailed and overly extended, then you should probably stop right now and check some of my other reviews. But if you are more about the musical experience and you really despise those nasty bright trebles, then please carry on. As for the Transient Response, hybrid IEMs like these ones are not part of the long decays fan club like an all dynamic driver IEM would be part of. So while the sub bass is indeed will decay a microsecond later, everything else is super tight, it's really clean, it's fast sounding and will decay at the right moment. And also as an added bonus, that weightier, that meatier bass delivery will also improve the slam of the bass, which is also really nice. KIS will probably not outperform an all-balanced armature IEM in terms of sheer speed, but they will surely outperform a lot of IEMs in the 500 to 1000 price bracket when it comes to body slams, when it comes to impact. So KIS are definitely more about moving huge amounts of air, about the slam that follows, than about perfect decay of the notes. I've tried them out of a smartphone and to my surprise, they didn't lose its magic that much. The tempo remained absolutely intact. Sound was again simply fuller and simply denser, unleashing some deep reaching bass notes while holding everything together in the frequency response. I will measure their decay very soon, but I expect an instant rise and decay in the mid-range and treble, and maybe just a hair slower bass delivery due to its dynamic driver moving slower compared to its dual balanced armature driver. In terms of how much power you actually need to drive this, with a sensitivity of 105 dB per 1 milliwatt of power, as you can imagine, KIS are really easy to drive and would not pose a big problem on your headphone jacks. Out of a smartphone or a laptop or any smart device, I didn't need more than 80% of volume for some ear-shaking volume levels. Even with some high dynamic range tracks like old jazz or classical music, KIS scaled really nicely out of a good sounding source, and I really like that these are not uber sensitive to the source noise or amplification noise like FiiO FA9 are, for example. So you can easily use them with noisier sounding portable devices, with noisier sounding desktop amplifiers, no problem. Most desktop headphone amplifiers didn't increase the noise floor and I was able to enjoy them equally well on the go or at home. In terms of soundstage and depth, there is one unwritten rule that nobody will tell you in hi-fi, well, except for me. So be it a loudspeaker or a headphone that has a close to perfect bass delivery, moving simply more air down to the lowest octaves, that fact alone will always lead to a better sound in your room with a stereo setup or to a wider soundscape with headphones. So in a stereo setup, air actually moves a lot more in the bass region. There is a strong reason people are buying bass traps, so they could control that, that air in the bass and null those unwanted vibrations. By IEM standards and to my ears, these are quite impressive in here and will offer a slightly bigger soundstage compared to regular hybrid sounding IEMs. Of course, being an IEMs sitting simply with their driver sitting millimeters away from my eardrums, I can't talk about sound that is simply meters away from me, so that didn't happen. But all sounds happened simply outside my head, so I'm not sure if that bass delivery helped them or not. But I can't complain about the soundstage size on all axes. Depth is well defined and I could easily hear notes on multiple layers and perceive the distance between myself and every musician in the room. Pinpoint imaging is precise, keys are not muddy sounding IEMs, and everything appeared as looking through a clean window. As for details, after listening to them for more than 2 weeks, I'm inclined to say that they will hunt for the smallest details in your music. Well, except for those past 12 kHz where they will simply roll off that performance and offer that easygoing, smooth experience. I went through a series of reference tracks, so ranging from classical to jazz to acoustic music, and with all that, KIS appeared as transparent sounding, so adding some of its own flavor, coloring my music, but always sounding in a very detailed manner without adding fog or muddiness in my music. Transparent and well-spread music was crisp, quite defined and precise, with just a hair of the upper treble being wiped clean. There were indeed few smallest nuances like tambourines and bells that went out of the picture way too fast for my liking, losing in terms of contour, leading edge and decay. On the other hand, the most sensitive part of our hearing was extra crisp, defined and very well made. Sometimes it could appear as too good to a point of sounding a bit harsh and sibilant for a microsecond, but only in treble intensive tracks. Moving on to the frequency response, the sub-bass starts really strong in here. I'm going as far and say that this is probably the deepest sub-bass I have experienced with IEMs, and if you think that your FiiO FA7 are really strong in the bass, think twice, because these are something else, my friends. So these are not bass cannons by any means, but they will surely impress a bass addict, that is for sure. Yes, it is elevated a bit in here by a few dB, but it is also a clean and super tight type of bass. It is easy in spilling over the mid-range section, and it's a breathing and pulsating type of bass. It's a pure joy listening to any kind of modern music, and things like R&B, rap and electronica simply shined brighter with these IEMs. Bass went down and it hit like a thunder, and then it vanished like nothing happened. I personally like its fast and detailed nature. Bass layers can't hide with an IEM like this. You probably know my tastes by now. My name is Sandu and I am a mid-range addict. I am holding this part above any other frequency. So this is the only frequency range that didn't feel elevated at all, nor it was going down either, and it felt somewhat straight as a line and really linear without any potholes whatsoever in that region. At first it might sound like some kind of V-shaped sounding IEMs, and to some degree that is actually correct, but instead of dropping down frequencies, LittleDot decided to elevate some of them, and I think that was a great decision, because no matter how strong is the bass, mid-range will always remain linear and really present and straight as a line in the right doses. It has a decent amount of warmth and definition. Voices always sounded clear and had a right natural pitch. I'm not experiencing metallic voices like an all-armature IEMs tend to sound like. Mid-range is more lifelike in here. As for treble, the most sensitive part of our hearing is a little bit elevated by a few dB, giving this feeling of a breathing sound, of a sharper details, of a higher transparency than usual. So most higher notes like cymbal crashes, like tambourines are happening exactly in this region, and those felt really powerful, visceral, almost brutal at times, sounding very clear and always having a clean, defined leading edge. Modern music with a lot of drums sounded very engaging actually. I was toy tapping all this time and I enjoyed every minute of my electronica or folk rock. The S sounds are sometimes bothersome and piercing, but only for a very short period and only in some particular treble intensive tracks. I also did some measurements using a mini DSP ear system, so I will briefly show you right now their raw frequency response, and as you can see, their bass and mid to high treble is slightly elevated. Total harmonic distortion is good, its dynamic driver barely touches that 1% of distortion, and same can be said about its balanced armature drivers. Spectral decay is showing that bass isn't lingering that much, and this is exactly what I've heard with them too. Spectrogram will be showing the hot zones, and as you can see, its bass and a small portion of the treble will be drawing the full attention of the listener. Waterfall is great, it's smooth, meaning that KIS has minimal driver ringing. I also compared this with the FiiO FA9, but since I don't want to have long and boring reviews, please check out my detailed comparison in my written review that you can find somewhere around here. It's on chapter 8 and it's one click away. As for the conclusion, I have tried a healthy number of IEMs in the last few years, but neither of them strictly followed that Harman curve like these ones did. Not only it is super engaging all the time, it's also measured very well in the most key areas. I was surprised by its bass delivery the most, as it didn't sound like small IEM bass, but more like hard slamming planar bass, if you know what I mean. I liked that power is not mandatory with this, and even a smartphone was able to drive them to ear-bleeding levels. A nicer sounding digital source did make a positive change, and I would personally get a nice Bluetooth dongle like a FiiO BTR5 or Shining UP4 and be done with it. LittleDot KIS will cost you $729 right now, but I do a chilly feeling that they might be discounted on Black Friday. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed my review. My full in-depth review is waiting on my website. In case you want to support the channel, please subscribe to it, and thank you for doing that. And as usual, listen to my music, be positive, and I'll see you next time. Cheers guys, bye bye.